Speak with Lord Andrew Robathan, former government minister with us, who knows his way around some of these figures. Good afternoon to you, Andrew.
Good afternoon.
I do sense, and I may be wrong, and maybe I'm just as I said a second ago, maybe I'm just a little cynical on some of these things, but it's about how you count things, isn't it? I mean, that's essentially the trick here.
Ian, the whole thing is entirely risible, laughable. Let's just look back at what Yvette Cooper has said over the last couple of years. Now, I haven't got the time to do the research, but if you look at what she said in Hansard, I can tell you will discover that things like, I mean, she may not have said this, but a lot of people did, detention centres for illegal immigrants are inhumane, I think was the term used, inhumane.
Correct.
Now, look, this is nonsense. And did she or did she not oppose all the flights to Rwanda? Has she been there supporting the Conservative government, which after all only lost office 2 months ago? Was she supporting deportations by Conservative government? Or is it always the Labour side and Labour MPs that are arguing you mustn't deport people? And this is just risible. It's absurd.
She is talking about sort of record numbers. And as I said a second ago, you've only got to hit the figure of 1 to achieve a record number. Many of our listeners who are very diligent on these things, doing their own research, and say, well, look, you know, you'd have to be to make a tangible difference. And Rwanda, we never did find out whether it would have worked because it was now kicked away forevermore by the new government. But you've got to be looking at 1,000 people a week to even begin to shift the problem.
No, absolutely. In fact, higher than that. And this is, of course, I mean, the whole issue over these riots, an underlying issue was a dissatisfaction with immigration in general. So we're only talking about illegal migration, not the legal migration, which is another big issue. But let's be quite clear. The Rwanda scheme was already starting to deter people. It was starting, and the Rwanda scheme was quite, should we just say, unusual. But it was starting to deter people. There's no question of that. And then as soon as Keir Starmer gets in, he scraps it. Well, I think that's very unwise. And he then blames the Conservatives for having put up the money to the Rwandan government. Well, he was the one that scrapped it, not us.
Where do you think, I mean, Labour, presumably in their own mind, would like to think they can solve this, Andrew. They would like to get to the first term in office and say, look, we've actually done something. They would be very easily rumbled if they hadn't. So trying to put yourself into their boots on this, what do you think that Yvette Cooper and Mr Starmer are up to here? What do you sense is likely to be the way they move forward here?
Personally, I see it as window dressing and a very, very let's not say it's easy. It's a very difficult problem. But she's going to talk to the French government. Apparently, oh, that's a good idea. Did we do that? She's going to tackle the people gangs. Oh, yes, I think we've been trying to do that for about a decade. You know, all this, and by the way, we've been opposed throughout by the Labour Party. Opposed throughout. With all measures we tried to take, we were opposed throughout. And I'm afraid the idea that she's now going to turn from gamekeeper to poacher, or vice versa, poacher to gamekeeper, I suppose, is nonsense. She just won't. This is window dressing. They'll say they're doing something, but I promise you, the subject will not go away.
Indeed. We'll get to the end of 5 years and I think we'll be speaking again, Andrew, and nothing will have changed. Listen, Lord Andrew Robathan, thank you, former government minister with us here on Talk One. Here comes in Mr Collins, the only two-tier, no idea Starmer is going to smash is the country we live in. Might be right about that. William Roberts makes this point. Here's a simple fact. Now, bearing in mind, there's a couple of migration, there's more than 2 elements or strands to this story, but there's the obvious divide is legal migration, which is where the big numbers come in, and that would include students and other elements of people coming in on visa schemes and the like. And then there's the channel crossing thing, and I constantly hear sort of left-wing commentators say, well, it's only a tiny number. Well, it's a smaller number than the legal stuff, but it's not a tiny number. If you bring 20, 30,000 people, 40 or 50,000 people a year into your country, there's no one with a brain cell that would say that's a tiny number. And you do that over, 5 short years, and we're already 3 or 4 in, and you've got a third of a million people have arrived. That's not a tiny number. And these are people that are likely to end up, on balance, staying here as well. That is not a tiny number. It's not a tiny number on any day. It's not a tiny number on a good day. It's certainly not a tiny number when you've got stretch resources, and I'm thinking obvious things like health and school. Pensioners having their winter fuel allowance taken away while simultaneously paying £6 million a day to house people in hotels. I mean, is anyone with a straight face going to... Can you square that circle? I'd love to, you know, if there's a lefty listening to this, just tell me why that's OK. I'm struggling to work out why that's OK. I'm struggling why me Uncle Bert can't get his foot operation despite being in chronic pain, paid in all his life, worked like a dog all his life, has NAFL, lives in a council house, can't get treatment, and yet round the corner there are people in a hotel who are probably not meant to be here. And there's money for that. Right? There's money for that. Like, hotels are being paid a bomb to house these people, and the companies, the security companies, you know, those big government security contract companies, are being paid a lot of money to look after them. I mean, is there anybody? You wouldn't teach a 6-year-old that was OK, would you? You'd teach a 6-year-old that was clearly not OK, and there's something wrong with the system. This is the story, children, of the broken system, and you'd give that as an example. Am I losing something here? But it was interesting on that point that William says, here's a simple fact. If we cut immigration today to 300,000 per annum, by 2040, our population will still be 9 million more. And an Indigenous person having a child today, by the time that child is 47, will be officially a minority in their own country. Now, we can argue the point of the, you know, the rights and the wrongs, or the, you know, mostly the rights about retaining an identity to a host country. I don't think anybody should apologise for that. But just look at those numbers, and I'm taking his word for it on this, that our population by 2040, which is, what, 16 years away, 15 and a half years away, would increase by 9 million. I mean, nobody can square that circle, can they?